first performance of the Seaside Arts Festival. This is our 19th year producing this, and we thought we'd do it up a little bit differently tonight. So tonight we're back in the 50s, in the early 60s, and we're reliving that whole idea. And we're going to be treating you to some beat poetry, some riffs, our wonderful duo at the top of the stairs, that's Graham Ford and Bill Steenhuis. And they're going to be playing intermittently in and around some of the other activities we have tonight, including some poetry readings with some riffing and some fun things like they would do back in that particular time period, which is a little bit before my time. I get it. And then we're going to be treating you to a very special vignette, a scene from Jim Christy's play, Jackie and Jack, and that's going to come just after the intermission. So we will have an intermission, so don't worry. There's lots of time to go get a break, have another glass of wine, go to the washrooms, which are right behind me. And in the meantime, we do want you to make sure your cell phones are turned down, of course. And also, just to remind you that we have a whole slew of events over the next 3 weeks. So we gave you a program. It'd be great if you could take a look. There's an event guide there as well if you're interested in anything else. And we also have a great fashion show coming up on Sunday, but that's a whole other story. But it's all about upcycling, which is the theme of the show. And also the theme for our festival this year. So we're talking about reliving, remaking, reimagining, and also repurposing and recycling. So we have a little bit of that, throughout all of our different events this year. So I'm going to start by introducing you to Jim Christy, who's going to say a few words. Now, Jim is an amazing, multi-talented artist. I don't know how many of you know Jim. He's been living in the community for quite a few years, but of course he originally comes from Philly. And he's got some information to give us a little bit of a setup on what times were like back in that era, the Beat generation. He is definitely from that era, and we're going to let him speak to that before we get into the next part of our show. By the way, you'll see Jim Christy's pieces around the room. If you get a chance to mingle or get up at the end of the program, we'll turn the lights on, and you can see some of Jim's amazing art and very artistic assemblages that he's done for the show and over the years. So, Jim, can I introduce you? Can you come up to the mic and say a few words? There you go.
Thank you. Now, I don't know what to say about beatniks. Now, what do you say? It's not like hippies. I got plenty to say about them. As far as I know, there were no beatniks. It was a literary movement. Then it got out of hand. Like this morning, I looked up beatnik fashions. And it's a big thing now. It's a craze. It's bigger than it was in 1958. There's a Beatnik's Bistro in Fort Langley. True. There's a Beatnik restaurant in Edmonton. There's a line of Beatnik pouches and bags for ladies. And the other day, I picked up a video from the thrift store. It's called Beatnik Killers. And these guys, they were hoodlums. They were like crackheads of this era, but they were out killing people. You never didn't see that with hippies. They were too dull to kill anybody. Sorry, I don't want to offend anybody that's here, but It was a totally different thing. We'll get into that later, but the beats were from all classes of society. The hippies, and I know some of you will argue this point, mainly because they're hippies. They were solidly middle class, you know. But enough. No sense being a curmudgeon at the beginning of the thing. There's a poem that I think sums up a little bit of the spirit of the age. This is for Charlie Leeds, who's gone, real gone. Let's be zoot-suit heroes of the starry night, skulking gaunt and bent down 1,052nd streets of time. Let's hold our heads down and to the side, sort of, and not give a damn. Let's be God for a block, and junkie for a block, and step on all the cracks. Let's beat out Congo dashboard rhythms to Dexter Gordon and Symphony Sid, and cry when they play all the things you are. Let's jazz all the angels in celestial back seats and call it going down on a cloud. Let's drag our axes up boardwalks, down alleyways, and across continents, running hot and cool. But we'll finally come to the end of heaven, of course. And we do, when we do, let's take our stance there on the windy edge and blow soul peanuts into the mall. Soul peanuts, soul peanuts. Crazy, man. And those are my opening remarks.
All you Hepcats for making the scene tonight. Thanks to Jim Christy. So Jim's coming back later on. There's going to be a Q&A at the end. He's going to make some more remarks, things like that. He's got some great stories from the time. I hope we can convince him to tell some. And how about those guys up on top above us? You know that? Okay, I'm going to... All right, I'm going to do a poem, a Jack Kerouac poem from Kerouac's 1960 album, Readings by Jack Kerouac on the Beat Generation. And it is called The History of Bop. Bop began with jazz. But one afternoon, somewhere on a sidewalk, maybe 1939, 1940, Dizzy Gillespie or Charlie Parker or Thelonious Monk was walking down past a men's clothing store on 42nd Street or South Main in LA, and from a loudspeaker they suddenly heard a wild, impossible mistake in jazz that could have only been heard inside their own imaginary head, and that is a new art. Bop. The name derives from an accident. America was named after an Italian explorer, not after an Indian king. Lionel Hampton had made a record called Hey Bop-a-Ree Bop. And everybody yelled it. And it was when Lionel would jump in the audience and wail the saxophone that everybody would sweat, class jumping fools in the aisles, and the drummer vastly booming and belaboring on the stage as the whole theater rocked. Sung by Helen Hughes, it was a popular record and sold many copies around 1945 or 46. First, everyone looked around, and then it happened. Bop happened. The bird flew in. Minds went in. On the streets, thousands of new type hepcats in red shirts and some goatees, and strange queer-looking cowboys from the west with boots and belts. And the girls began to disappear from the streets somehow. You no longer saw, as in the 30s, the Wrangler walking with his doll in the honky-tonk. Now he was alone. Bop, came into being because the girls were leaving the guys and going off to be middle-class models or something. And Dizzy or Charlie or Thelonious was walking down the street, heard a noise, a sound, half Lester Young, half raw, rainy fog, that has that chest-shivering excitement of shack or track or empty lot. A sudden vast tiger head on the wood fence, rainy no-school Saturday morning dump yards. Hey! And rushed off dancing. On the piano that night, Thelonious introduced a wooden off-key note to everybody's warm-up notes. Minton's Playhouse. Evening starts, jam hours later, 10 p.m., colored bar and hotel next door. One or two white visitors, some from Columbia, some from nowhere, some from ships, some from Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, some from Europe. A strange note makes the trumpeter of the band lift an eyebrow. Dizzy is surprised for the first time that day. He puts the trumpet to lips and blows a wet blur. Hee hee ha, laughs Charlie Parker, bending down to slap his ankle. He puts his alto to his mouth and says, "Didn't I tell you?" with jazz of notes. Talking eloquent like great poets of foreign languages, singing in foreign countries with lyres by seas. And no one understands because the language isn't alive in the land yet. Bop is the language from Africa, America's inevitable Africa. Going sounded like gong. Africa is the name of the flu and kick beat off to one side. A sudden squeak, uninhibited, that screams muffled at any moment from Dizzy Gillespie's trumpet. Do anything you want. The band of 10 p.m. Minton swings into action. Was only 18 years old, has a crew cut of Africa, looks impossible, has perfect eyes and composures of the king, when suddenly you stop and look at him in the subway and you can't believe that bop is here to stay, or modern music, call it what you will, that it is real. Because on cold corners they stood three backs to one another, facing all the winds, bent, lips don't care, miserable, cold and broke, waiting like witch doctors, saying, "Everything belongs to me because I am poor." Like 12th century monks high in winter belfries of the Gothic organ, they wild-eyed were listening to their own wild sound, which was heralding a new age of music that would eventually require symphonies, schools, centuries of technique, declines and falls of master-ripe styles. The Dixieland of Louis Armstrong 16 and New Orleans and the Big Pops forest, all that was mud in the river Mississippi pasts of 1910 gold rings, derby hats of workers. Soon enough it would leap and fill the gay 20s like champagne in a glass. Pop. And crawl up to the 30s with tired Rudy Valleys, lamenting the Louis who had laughed in the 20s transoceanic jazz. The world of the United States was tired of being poor and low and gloomy and swing erupted as the Depression began to crack. It was the year marijuana was made illegal, 1937. Young teenagers took to the first restraint, the second, the third. Some still wandered in hobo trains. Lost boys of the 30s numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Salvation armies put up full houses every night, and some were 10 years old. Teenagers alienated from their parents who had suddenly returned to work and for good to get rid of that damn old mud of the river. Tear the vine off the porch and paint the porch white, cut the trees down and castrate the hedges, burn the leaves, build a wire fence, get up an antenna. Listen. The alienated teenager in the 20th century, finally ripe, gone wild, modern to be rich and prosperous, no more just around the corner, became the hepcat, the jitterbug, and smoked the new law weed. World War II gave everybody 2 pats of butter in the morning on a service tray, including your sister. Up from tired, degrading swing, wondering what had happened between 37 and 45 because the army had worked it, canned it, played it to the boys in North Africa, enraged it in the Piccadilly bars, and the Andrews sisters put the corn in the can. Swing with its heroes died. And Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, and Thelonious Monk, who were hustled through the chow lines, came back remembering old goofs. And tried it again, and zop! Dizzy screamed, Charlie squealed, Monk crashed, the drummer kicked, the bass question mark plunked, and off they wailed on Saul Peanuts, jumping like mad monkeys in the gray new air. They came to their own, they jumped, they had jazz and took it in their hands and saw its histories, vicissitudes and developments and turned it to their weighty use and heavily carried it clanking like posts across the enormity of a new world. Philosophy and a new strange and crazy grace came over them, fell from the air free. They saw pity in the whole of heaven, hell in their hearts. Billie Holiday had rocks in her heart. Lester, droopy pork pie, had hung his horn and blue bop lazy ideas inside jazz that everybody was dreaming. Miles Davis, leaning against the piano, fingering his trumpet with his cigarette hand, working, making raw iron sound like wood, speaking in long sentences like Marcel Proust. Hey Jim, and the stud comes swinging down the street and says he's real bent and he is down and he has a twisted face. He works, he wails, he bops, he bangs. This man who was sent, stoned and stabbed is now down, bent and stretched out. He is home at last. His music is here to stay. His history has washed over us. His imperialistic kingdoms are coming.
And freed from their mothers' mores, not all the women became middle-class moms. Not all the girls became models. Women's words were integral and essential to the creation of the beat movement. Hetty Jones, Lenore Jaffe, Ruth Weiss, Sally Stern, Diane DeCrema, Joanne Kiger, their words were wanted. The women were. from Necrophilia by Diane de Prima. The high-ridge body, roach, walks on thin legs, limps slightly. Dream sweat makes acid my pajamas. The sheet moves with your breathing. Light dapples the ceiling, undermines the walls. Cars pass. The child stirs, but she does not cry. Wind climbs the fire escape and shakes the window. Knees rise and fall. In this New York, cell on monastic cell, they sleep, we sleep, dreams stream from the women's hair. The high-bridge roach walks where the kitchen was. Ice claws the windows. Wind unlocks the door. How many nights shall I lie at your side, wearing pajamas, using a separate pillow? Mr. T and His Friends by Lenore Jaffe. One by one, I met, selected, the members of my coterie, my clan. Nothing within reason was too much to do for any of them, for all brought love, and were given like for like, with smiling grace, until one night, wearying, not knowing whom to love the best, I sent all away into the long corridors of the city, not quite knowing why. Perhaps that they might vie with one another in ways to win back my love. But now, they are hanging about in uncomfortable fashion, and I am none the gladder for any of this. I shall soon take up residence elsewhere. By Sally Stern, wait, I've been this way before. Wait, I've been this way before. I know these shapes and textures under blind fingers. I know that I shall be the sea and the mother, and never me. Wait, I am here under the sea, recognize me. Tongue-tempted, teased, you reach, breathing to break like sky fires in an inward breath. And then you kiss my mouth, then, and rest, like a child suckling in its innocence. All right, it's not me, it's the mother and the sea. And perhaps the best known poem and poet of the Beat generation, Allen Ginsberg, Howl. Or at least a portion thereof. I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked, dragging themselves through the Negro streets at dawn, looking for an angry fix. Angel-headed hipsters burning for the ancient heavenly connection to the starry dynamo in the machinery of night. Who poverty and tatters and hollow-eyed and high sat up smoking in the supernatural darkness of cold water flats, floating across the tops of cities, contemplating jazz. Who bared their brains to heaven and under the L and saw Mohammedan angels staggering on tenement roofs illuminated. Who passed through universities with radiant, cool eyes hallucinating. Arkansas and Blake, light tragedy among the scholars of war, who were expelled from the academies for crazy and publishing obscene odes on the windows of the skull, who cowered in unshaven rooms in underwear, burning their money in wastebaskets and listening to the terror through the wall, who got busted in their pubic beards, returning through Laredo with a belt of marijuana for New York, who ate fire in paint hotels or drank turpentine in Paradise Alley, death or purgatory their torsos night after after night, with dreams, with drugs, with waking nightmares, alcohol and cock and endless balls. Incomparable blind streets of shuddering cloud and lightning in the mind leaping toward poles of Canada and Patterson, illuminating all the motionless world of time between. Peyote solidities of halls, backyard green, tree cemetery dawns, wine drunkenness over the rooftops, storefront burrows of tea-head joyride, neon blinking traffic lights, sun and moon and tree vibrations in the roaring winter dusks of Brooklyn, ashcan rantings and kind king light of mind.
Hi, I'm back again. I can't use the mic. Thank you again to Graham and Paul for a wonderful set. They will be back a little bit later, so not to worry. Actually, somebody was saying to me in the audience, why don't we have a little jazz club here? It would be fantastic and very popular. Anyway, I'm going to introduce the next part of the show, which is a vignette of a wonderful play that Jim Christy wrote a few years ago. It's about Jackie Kennedy and Jack Kerouac. And of course, you already heard of the wonderful poems and earlier on, and specifically the one that Steve did with the band, which was a Jack Kerouac piece, of course. And Jack's centenary is this year. He would have been 100 years old. And he was also French Canadian. So in a way, we're honoring him tonight. And we're also honoring Jim, who, as a local author and playwright, has done this beautiful piece. He's also written probably about 6 or 7 books about his vagabond adventures through the years, and poems. He's got several books of poems. You can ask him about that later. And so this little vignette that we're going to present is just Act 1 of a 3-part play that we hope to be able to actually mount one of these days. It's a poignant, timeless type of piece about sort of forbidden love in a time of free love, really. You know, the early 60s going into, you know, the late 60s. And it's also a time that was charged with, you know, political angst and all sorts of other things, you know, being the early 60s. So we're going back in time once again, and we're going to do this vignette for you and hope you like it. And please come up to us afterwards and let us know if, you know, you think that we should move forward with this. That's part of what the festival does, is we try to kind of work like a fringe festival where we try out new things and see how everybody likes it. Because we think it's a fabulous script, and we'd love to see it go forward for a full play next year, who knows, the year after. So please take a look at first scene of Jackie and Jack.
Maybe them's the police. How do you close a beach? 3 minutes to 6. Maybe they've come to arrest me. Me. I am like this smoke. I preach that we are alone. There is no heavenly host. I come from the nowhere. I go to the no place, but I am. Just passing through. Same as you. No help for it. So I do all I can. But mostly, I'm all for man. Everybody thinks I'm just a crazy old nut who talks to myself. I do not talk to myself. You'll never hear me talk to myself. Methinks me must be going.
Hello, gorgeous. You look so lonely. You want some company?
That's one paysan.
Peasant? Moi? Moi? Why, you stuck up, you long nose, you maudit anglais.
I am not English.
Irish?
Perhaps half. Not that it's any of your business.
Of the lace curtain kind, I'd wager. If I had me glasses, I'd be able to tell. Where the devil are me glasses? And what's the other half? I guess Icelandic, were it not for your locks, which are awfully cute, wind blown as they are, if you don't mind me saying so.
I do mind. You have sunburn. But why Icelandic?
Cold exterior, though lovely to look at. Delightful to know. Perhaps warm inside, geothermally speaking.
Not that it's any of your business, but I'm French on my father's side.
Moi aussi, and on my mother's side too, but you, I don't believe.
A peasant, like I said, and close-minded.
I'll have you know that my great, and maybe another great grandfather was a general under Montcalm on the plains of Abraham, an aristocrat from noble Brittany.
True, which I doubt. The accent has degenerated over 2 centuries.
Degenerated? Have you presumed to insult the great French language? If you knew anything about it, you know that it is the real French that I am speaking. The classic 18th century French that was preserved in Quebec whilst degenerating in France due to German and Moorish influences, says I professorially. While you, madame, speak, as I assume did your father as well, high school French. And hoity-toity faux French it is. You must have attended hoity-toity high school. Hoity-toity, hip-hip
I attended the finest schools.
Did you learn the cotillion?
What?
Just as I thought.
Are you drunk?
Alas, no, I haven't been awake long enough, though I intend to work on it. Ask me this evening?
I don't think I will. We're just 2 would-be French people who happen to pass each other on the beach, having stopped to argue for a moment or 2.
What is your father's name?
Jack,
Ask me my name?
what is your name?
Jack.
Isn't that remarkable?
Sarcasm becomes you, or at least it seems to come naturally to you.
You remind me of him. He had black hair and blue eyes like you.
Was he a handsome devil, too?
Too. Well, let's just say he was a handsome devil.
Let's. You said it, not I. You know what Salvador Dali said?
How much will you pay me?
You mean you're a... Oh, Dali. Dollars. A vida dollars. But Andre Breton, a Breton from Brittany, just like me, called him. I get it. That was good. He also said I was more handsome than Brando.
Well, don't want to encourage you, but I suppose he's right.
Thank you. And please, don't worry. I'm not trying to capitalize on your comment. I'm no capitalist. What is your name?
Jacqueline.
Ah, you say it the French way.
And I wish others would too. They all pronounce it Jacqueline or Jacqueline. I used to correct them, but they just thought I was being pretentious. So now I call myself Jackie.
To my mare, I was Jackie. I call myself Jack.
Oh, my husband's name is also Jack.
Why'd you have to go and mention him? And where is he?
He's busy running.
Running on the beach? I was a fast runner in my day. On the track team at Lowell High. Also sank two-hand set shots from 30 feet out and hit clothesline drives between left and center for heroic late-inning doubles to drive in the winning run. Truly a triple threat athlete. But pardon my braggadocio.
He's not running on the beach, not with his bad back. He's running for office.
I hope he catches it. In the office, I mean.
He will. His father will make sure of that. He'll fix the race. He's the supreme capitalist.
Because you're so supreme, I scheme. A favorite song. I think I should grow a Bunny Berrigan mustache. But your father, let's talk about him rather than the race for dog catcher, the school
I'll
board.
have you know.
Have me know your father's surname. The upper crust French handle.
Bouvier.
Ha! Let down your eyebrows, skeptics. You know who said that? Walt Whitman.
Ooh, Whitman, a peasant barbarian who has heard of Whitman. Well, he did indeed like peasants and barbarians, elemental, streetcar drivers and deckhands and the like.
I was a deckhand, me, but 'twas Newt Hampson what drove the streetcar, and all he desired was to get back to Norway. But you, Jacqueline Bouvier, climb down off your high horse, ride your ox. Bouvier, you know what your name means? You must. But let me remind you, you who flings about the peasant handle, ox herder. Not precisely a noble calling, whereas my name means a stone wall.
Marvelous. You should be so proud. Now tell me what's so wonderful about a stone wall.
Madame, it surrounded our chateau. Moi. Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The chateau knows.
That's not bad.
Merci, madame. Monsieur Jean-Louis Lebris de Bergerac. I mean, Kerouac. At your service.
Kerouac? You're not Jack Kerouac.
The same.
Half the men in Greenwich Village these days claim to be Jack Kerouac.
I know. That's why I'm not in Greenwich Village. Why I'm here in old Cape Cod. But they're not me. I'm me, or at least I used to be. That rhymes.
You wrote that book that everyone's talking about. You're on everyone's lips.
Alas, merely my name is.
The On the Road book.
Don't I know it?
I haven't read it, but I distinctly remember reading the review in the Sunday New York Times. It was 2 days after I attended my father's funeral. And then I recall seeing a copy in the window at Brentano's. Come to think of it, you may indeed be the author. I can see the author's photograph in my mind.
Me looking like a 35-year-old Italian who reached down your throat and rip out your heart if you insulted his mother or his sister, one.
It really is you.
I'm afraid so.
You're an overnight sensation.
I wrote that book 10 times, 10 different versions. A couple of times it was in the third person. One version, I got 40 pages in, the protagonist was a woman, name of Red. And it was published 7 years after my first book. I'd already written 1 million words. Some overnight sensation.
You sound bitter.
Not to complain, my lovely, but the whole fame shot is driving me crazy. I wrote about going on the road in search of something, going toward something. Beatitude, I call it. Now I spend my time running away from something, that something being notoriety. Trying to hide from people who all want me to go to San Francisco with them in their hot rods, or in their father's cars, more like. be the special guest at their genuine beatnik party. And the newspapers, television, facetious journalists who think they're being clever. I just stepped in some.
Some what?
Some feces left by that species, the facetious.
It's a species I know all about, always snooping around. That's one good thing about my father and mother, afraid to say anything bad about my husband because of him.
I wore a fake beard and left New York and went to Long Island and bought a house. I had to take the beard off when I got to Northport because with it, I looked like people's idea of a beatnik. Ironic, what? Looking like the real me, they had no hesitation taking my money. Me, the king of the beats. After I bought the house, I got a cab and I went to Lowell, just down the road from here. I got drunk for 6 days. Last thing I remember, I saw Norman Mailer and Cape Cod in a Packard. And then I woke up on the beach this morning and I crossed the dunes like I was in Beau Geste. And I asked this guy walking his dog where I was, and he said, Hyannisport. And I asked him where the Kennedys lived, and he pointed and, hey, wait, you're Jackie. Your husband's Jack, and your father-in-law's the Supreme Capitalist. You must be.
To quote a writer I recently met on the beach, I'm afraid so.
I remember last year I was down in Florida where I lived with my mare, and we watched you on television, showing your home off to Edward R. Murrow, he of the Mephistophelian eyebrows. My mother said how beautiful you were, like a French aristocrat beauty. I was just worried that Murrow was gonna drag you down into the wine cellar or attack you up behind the wine vat. Looks like a satyr, all dark and hairy. He must shave 4 times a day, like our sneaky vice president.
I wasn't afraid. We were on national television.
I'm more famous than you are.
Oh, well, enjoy it while it lasts, because soon I will catch up and leave you in my wake. Who is that? Or rather, what's that?
That is your husband's new campaign manager. No, seriously. That is a woman who wanders the earth spreading the news that we are all doomed. I remember the first time I laid eyes on her. It was in Times Square in 1947. There was this little black kid staring at her as she walked by. The kid said to his big brother or his cousin, that woman there, she must be 110 years old. She may be. She is as old as time. Another guy hollers, hey, Bo, where you going? And the ghost says, California for now. Go moan for man.
Oh, a cheerful woman.
She's a holy woman, the seeker of truth, of Dharma, as the Buddhists call it. She's a Sidhu, a bhikkhu. In Tibet, she'd be a doctor. In Russia, she'd be accepted as a starret. Here, she's just some peripatetic nut.
You sound as if you know her.
I've come across her in my travels. Where you headed, Bo?
Might go up north to the Peace Country, or west to Puyallup. It don't matter how I wear out my shoes. As long as I spread the news. But you too. You go on for man. And go now alone. And moan.
Anyway, there I am where you left me, standing at a lonely crossroads in desolate Iowa, and I'll watch the exhaust from your limousine with bulletproof windows waft and finally disappear skyward, like smoke is drawn by serious 5-year-olds on schoolroom blackboards, as black as that vast American night of a billion stars. Well, cicadas make cicada sounds. Coyotes mock me loveless on the roadside sedge. I too will moan for manna. In fact, I always do. Home in Amarillo, home in Old Truckee, home in Disputanta, home I'll never be.
It's not bad.
At least it's better than what your husband wrote. Famous I may be, but nobody's given me any literary prizes, let alone Pulitzers, like the esteemed senator got for PP on the Line, or whatever it was called. We were both, however, on the bestseller list.
Want to know a secret? You can't blame the writing on him. He had very little to do with it. There must have been half a dozen or a dozen people worked on it, including me. And as for being a bestseller, his father bought 40,000 copies. He put them all over the compound, one from which I escaped this morning, and to which I needs must be returning. Oh heavens, I'm starting to talk like you.
My father bought no copies of On the Road, him being dead at publication time. Still is. Safe in heaven dead, which increasingly is what I wish to be, since I cannot return to my quiltish, innocent childhood delights, reading my comic books in the kitchen by the warm stove, mug of hot chocolate near to hand.
Don't talk like that.
You have something against French-Canadian kitchens and mugs of hot chocolate?
You have the world at your feet. You shouldn't be singing the blues.
I got a right to sing the blues. I got a right to feel downhearted. I got them train whistle, tired of living, scared of dying blues. The 210 Orizaba blues, Tom, yeah? Double dose of them blues.
Back, you're joking. I sense genuine despair.
And disrepair. But, madame, you don't seem as happy as can be either. Trifle downhearted, methinks. You'd rather see the pyramids along the Nile than old Cape Cod. Maybe not so enthused about getting back to the compound where the clan awaits. I've read about them.
And I've lived with them.
Come and live with me instead. Escape the Kennedy hex. Live with Kerouac in X.
Then I'd never get to be First Lady.
Well, at least we might see each other again sometime. Somewhere we won't be recognized.
I'd like that. I know, you said you bought a place on Long Island. Northworks?
A colonial.
My aunt and my cousin live in a ramshackle place on Long Island. I'll arrange to visit them and we can meet. It won't be for a few weeks yet. I have shopping centers to open.
And I have taverns to close. Until then, hey, Bo, wait up.
Hi. The wonderful Varya Rubin, Wanda Nowicki, and Steve Schwabl. So I think the band is going to do a little reprise for us while we find Jim. I know he's here somewhere, and he is willing to do a Q&A for us for a few minutes, and I'm sure you might have some questions to ask. So we're going to get Jim up here in a couple of minutes, and perhaps he'll talk a little bit about the origins of the vignette of the play that you just saw, and a few other things about the beat Jen, living in Philly in the 50s, that sort of thing. Jim?
Even the anarchists saying, don't vote, it only encourages them. I also have instructions not to criticize hippies, which will be difficult not to do. No, seriously. The beatniks and the hippies were a different breed of folk. I think I mentioned that earlier. The beatniks were from all levels, classes of society, and the hippies were mainly a middle-class movement. I was interested in the beats as a literary movement. I never went out to meet beatniks like some people did. They made pilgrimages to Gilles Lecoeur and the Beat Hotel in Paris. Not me, I was never a scene maker. I did meet Allen Ginsberg 3 times, but that's no big thing. What would be unusual was if I hadn't met Allen Ginsberg. Everyone met Allen Ginsberg. But I never met Kerouac. You clapped? Let's see. I was fortunate to become friends in Vancouver with the first black beatnik, Ted Jones, Joans, who wound up here and died here, as they said. He was also known as the only black surrealist poet, also taken up by Andre Breton. And he's the man who's responsible for those writing that appeared on bridges and walls when Charlie Parker died. Bird lives. If you know or have heard about that, he did that. He was a multi-talented guy, jazz trumpet player, impressionist painter, and good companion. He's the only real beatnik that I met, because I didn't go after them. I didn't want to meet him, you know. I mean, they have enough to do, enough people seeking their attention without having some young guy wanting them to jump in his 52 Chevy and drive to San Francisco. Actually, that happened once, but never mind. I don't know, man.
Are you taking questions?
Am I who?
Taking questions?
Yeah. Ask me one. That was the first one. Ask me another
Did
one.
you ever talk to Jackie Kennedy?
I did talk to Jackie Kennedy, believe it or not. Did you know that? Is that why you asked me?
Yeah.
Are you a plant? It's a true story. I was living on Comox Street in Vancouver, and I had this threadbare apartment. At least the rug was threadbare. I got a chair in there. And got a phone call one day, one afternoon. I said, hello. And the voice said, Jim? I said, yes. This is Jackie. I said, Jackie who? Jackie Onassis. I laughed, you know. Getting a call from Jackie Onassis, that hadn't happened in weeks. So we talked for about an hour and a half. And see, I had a book being published by Doubleday. And Jackie Onassis was the, what they called a handling editor. Basically, she called you to make you feel important, to cover up for the fact you weren't making any money. But she was nice, she was pleasant, she knew a lot of stuff. And the next day I got a call from the Toronto editor who said, I just got off the phone with Jackie. She said, you guys talked an hour and a half, and at the end you still didn't believe it was her. Well, you know, I'm not used to that.
Any more questions?
Yes.
How do you feel about humanity in the next 100 years?
I don't have high hopes given what's going on lately. Salmon dying in the riverbeds, the American political scene. What's there to be hopeful for? Somebody said to me earlier in the night, well, maybe there'll be a revolution. I don't think so. You know, the people who made revolutions in earlier times are right-wing. You know, the working class and the students, they'll never come together in the United States. No. A revolution is needed, but it ain't gonna happen. There's gonna be sporadic fighting, insurgency in the United States, especially if Trump wins again or loses. No, I'm not hopeful.
Thank you, and I'm sorry I asked.
What inspiration for the play?
It was weird. It just came to me out of the blue. I had heard that happened with writers sometimes. Something will just come out of the blue with them, at them, and they'll write it down. Well, this happened to me. I had always been a fan of Jack Kerouac, and I saw a picture of him once, and from 1958, which is when the play is set. And I saw a picture of Jackie Kennedy from 1958. And damn, they looked awfully close together. They were both good-looking people. And that got me started. And so I wrote this thing, and a reviewer in the Toronto Star said, you go into the play thinking, this is a ludicrous idea. You come out of the play thinking it really happened. Well, but the weirdest thing was, the play ends with him giving her his latest book, Dharma Bums. She's going away to some political event, and she says, I'm going to read it on the train. And that play ended, and a little while later I came across an image of her on the internet sitting on a train seat with her feet up on the seat in front of her, and she's reading Dharma Bums. And chills went up the back of my head at that. What was the question? Yeah, that was the inspiration.
How many books have you written?
37. Yep. And it sure have made me a lot of money.
What was the last one?
It's been 3 or 4 years since I've had a book published. I think the last one was Heart of the World, a collection of poems written over the years about place and about traveling.
What's your favorite topic to write about?
Ants. Not the kind with uncles, but actually crawly things. I'm going to write an ant epic.
I'll read it.
And I intend to recite it here next year.
You have any translations? And I'm just
Of
wondering
ants?
of your books and how the beatnik writings in general, were they universal enough to influence, like, you know, any of the romantic languages or even Russia? What happened with that?
Well-
Or was the, you know, the rhythm in it just maybe it didn't work in those?
I don't know, but Jack Kerouac is